All right, so today we're diving into the mind of Christopher Langan.
Ooh.
This guy has been called, like, the smartest man in the world because of his crazy high IQ scores.
I've heard that, yeah.
But here's the thing. He lives on a farm in Missouri.
Really?
Yeah, simple life. We're going to try to figure out why. Our source material is this long interview from CTMU radio.
Okay.
It's fascinating stuff. So Langan's path, it wasn't exactly, normal.
I can imagine.
He had a tough childhood, not a lot of money. He basically found escape in books.
Classic, huh? Finding knowledge wherever you can.
Totally. And you can see that thirst for knowledge stayed with him his whole life.
Makes you wonder how that shaped his views on education though, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. College was rough for him, felt like an outsider, didn't mesh with the professors.
I can see that.
Said he felt stifled, like the environment was too rigid.
Yeah, it makes you think, are these systems really built for someone like that?
Exactly. And it wasn't just college. He talked about working these jobs that seemed totally mismatched with his intellect.
Like what?
A grommet factory, bouncing at bars. Even said he felt pushed away from normal careers because he asked too many questions, like the wrong questions.
It's like society tries to put these brilliant minds into boxes, and then when someone like Langan comes along and breaks the mold, it doesn't always go smoothly.
It's true. It's like they don't know what to do with them. But even with all that, his drive to learn never stopped.
That's amazing.
He was always hitting up used bookstores, soaking up info wherever he could.
That says a lot about him. It wasn't about fitting in or getting a fancy degree. It was about something deeper, right?
Absolutely. And that drive is what led him to develop his own theory of everything.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He calls it the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, or CTMU.
CTMU. I know, it's a mouthful.
So what's the gist? I mean, a theory of everything, that's a pretty bold claim.
It is. We could do a whole separate deep dive on just the CTMU, but basically he says reality is logical geometric.
It's like a blend of Einstein's theories of relativity with the ideas of philosophers like Bertrand Russell.
Oh, wow. So he's bringing together physics and logic.
Exactly. And he uses these really cool terms like conspansion and telic recursion.
Whoa, those sound intense.
They are. Conspansion is like this idea that the universe is expanding outward, but also constrained by logic and wrath.
Okay, I kind of get it. So it's growing, but within a framework.
Yeah, like a tapestry that's constantly weaving itself, but following certain rules.
Cool analogy. And what about telic recursion?
That one's even trippier. It's all about how information is processed, kind of like nested Russian dolls.
Okay.
Each doll contains a smaller version of itself.
Yeah.
And Langan says reality is kind of like that, layers of info nested within each other.
So like information within information.
Yeah, and it all connects back to this central intelligence that he identifies as, you guessed it, God.
Ah, there it is. So he's tackling the big question head on, does God exist?
Oh, yeah. And for Langan, it's a definite yes.
No hesitation there.
None at all. His argument is actually pretty simple. Reality has an identity, right? And that identity has to have the qualities we usually attribute to God.
Like self-awareness, self-creation.
Exactly. It's like if there's a painting, there must be a painter.
That's a good way to put it. So he's not just throwing out a belief, he's got reasoning behind it.
Oh, definitely. He even compares it to that story of Moses in the burning bush, where God says, I am that I am. It's pure being, the source of everything.
Wow, okay. But here's where things get really wild. Langan says consciousness isn't just for humans.
Yeah, this is where it gets mind-bending.
He thinks it's everywhere, in the whole universe.
It all goes back to that logical geometric reality idea. He says there are these tiny units of information called identity operators.
Identity operators, huh?
Think of them like tiny processors, always working to keep reality running, processing info.
So is he saying, like, my coffee cup is conscious?
Well, he wouldn't say it's conscious like you and I are, with complex thoughts and all that. But he is saying that even at that basic level, there's a form of awareness, of information processing happening within the cup itself.
It's like a basic building block of consciousness, a little piece of the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's all connected, this web of consciousness throughout the universe.
This is a lot to take in, man. So we've got the CTMU, consciousness everywhere, God is the source. Where do we even go from here?
Well, things are about to get even more interesting because next we're going to dive into Langan's thoughts on the afterlife.
Oh, man. Can't wait for that. All right. So last time we were getting into Langan's CTMU, his ideas about God, consciousness. It's pretty wild stuff.
It really is. And it kind of leads us to this big question. What about the afterlife.
Yeah, like where does that fit into all of this?
Well, the interview actually dives into that too, and Langan's views on what happens after we die are just as mind-blowing as everything else he talks about.
I can imagine with the CTMU and all that.
Right, so what does he say happens? Like heaven, hell, reincarnation?
Well, he doesn't really get into specific places like heaven or reincarnation or anything like that, but he does talk about this idea that the self, our consciousness, doesn't just disappear when we die.
So like we still exist in some form.
Exactly. And he brings back those identity operators we talked about.
Oh, right. Those tiny little processors of information.
Yeah. He says they're not just in our brains, they're everywhere.
So they're not limited to our physical bodies.
Right. So even when our bodies die, those identity operators and our consciousness, they keep going.
Wow. Okay, so that's interesting. But what about, like, hell? Does he believe in that?
He does, but not in the way you might think, like fire and brimstone and all that.
Okay, so how does he see it?
For Langan, hell is like this state of being separated from God, this self-created world of evil that happens when you reject truth.
It's kind of like that saying, the mind can make a heaven of hell of heaven.
Totally. It's about choices. Our actions shaping our experience both in this life and after.
So aligning yourself with God, with truth, that's the key to a good afterlife, according to Langan.
That's the idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but Langan doesn't just talk about these big metaphysical ideas. He also gets into some pretty strong opinions about the world as it is today.
Oh, yeah. He does not hold back.
Especially when it comes to what he calls globalism.
Yeah, the idea that a powerful elite is running the show, eroding borders, taking away freedom.
He paints a pretty bleak picture, and he even brings up the possibility of, like, aliens being involved somehow.
I know, that part gets pretty out there, but even setting aside the alien stuff, a lot of people are concerned about those same things, right?
Absolutely. That concentration of power, the loss of individual freedom, those are big issues that resonate with people across the political spectrum.
It's true. And Langan, despite all his criticism, he still believes in peaceful change, right?
Oh, yeah. He emphasizes that real power is at the local level, in communities taking action.
It's like that whole idea of the Founding Fathers fighting for independence from an overreaching government.
Exactly. And that connects to his whole critique of modernity, like modern architecture, consumerism, even the education system.
He really sees all of that as a form of control, a way to make people conform.
It's like we've lost touch with beauty, with purpose, with meaning, all replaced by this pursuit of stuff, of profit.
Yeah, he uses this term telic economy to describe the interconnectedness of truth, beauty, and meaning, and how we've kind of lost sight of that in modern times.
And he ties that into his critique of what he calls monopoly capitalism, where a few big corporations control everything.
He uses examples like electric cars and the switch away from incandescent light bulbs.
He's not necessarily against those things in themselves, but he sees them as part of this bigger trend of limiting choice, of controlling people.
And he makes a clear distinction between that and what he calls fair capitalism, where people can succeed but still operate ethically with a sense of purpose.
It's a nuanced view, you know? He's not just blindly following a party line.
Definitely not. And his take on the education system is just as scathing.
Oh, yeah. He calls it an indoctrination factory, churning out people who just accept the dominant worldview.
He really lays into the new atheists, too, guys like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens.
He sees them as actively hostile to religion and spirituality.
And he claims that they've basically shut down any opposing viewpoints within academia.
Whether you agree with him or not, it's a reminder that even in the world of ideas, there are power dynamics, attempts to silence dissenting voices.
Okay, so we've gone through the CTMU, God, consciousness, the afterlife, critiques of society. But there's one more thing we got to talk about, UFOs.
UFOs? Wait, really? Langan believes in UFOs.
Well, he talks about his own personal experience seeing one, and he doesn't dismiss the idea that they could be something more than just misidentified objects.
Wow, okay, that's interesting. It seems like even the smartest man in the world is open to the possibility that there's more to the universe than we know.
Absolutely. And he even throws out the idea that maybe some of these UFOs are connected to that global elite he talks about.
Like they're being influenced by extraterrestrial intelligence or something. That's a pretty wild theory.
It is, but you know, with all the talk about UAPs these days, even government officials are admitting there are things we can't explain.
It's true. And for Langan, this whole UFO thing seems to have reinforced his distrust of mainstream narratives, that feeling that we're not being told the whole truth.
It makes you wonder if even someone like Langan, with his incredible intellect, is questioning these things. What does that mean for the rest of us?
That's a great question. and one we can explore further when we come back for the final part of our deep dive. Man, we've gone deep on this one.
I know, right? The CTMU, God, consciousness, the afterlife, even UFOs. It's a lot to process.
It really is. But throughout all of it, there's this one thing that sticks with me. Langan's search for meaning. Like, in a world that feels kind of obsessed with stuff, with the material, he's looking for something deeper.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's almost like, despite all his brain power, his theories, his core message is really human, right? We need to connect to something bigger than ourselves, find truth, find meaning, and it's not about money or possessions.
Kind of refreshing, actually, especially these days, Everything's so loud, so fast. It's easy to lose sight of those big questions.
Totally. It's like he's saying, hey, stop for a second, take a breath, ask yourself, what matters? What am I really living for?
And he provides a way to navigate that, Connect with God, seek truth, seek beauty. Remember, there's something larger than just us.
And what I find interesting is that he doesn't pit faith against reason, like some people do.
No, he seems to see them working together. He even says we should understand what we have faith in.
Yeah, that's important. So as we wrap this up, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What do you hope sticks with them?
That's a tough one. But I think the most important thing is that even someone like Langan, this guy who's considered super intelligent, he's still wrestling with these big questions, the nature of reality, God, meaning it shows that these are human questions. We all face them.
It's kind of unifying in a way, right? We're all in this together trying to figure it out.
Exactly. And even if you don't buy everything Langan's saying, just engaging with these ideas, it stretches your mind, challenges your assumptions. Maybe you see things in a new light.
So to our listener, what if Langan's right? What if pursuing truth and meaning really is more important than all the material stuff? How would that change your life, your priorities?
It's a good thought experiment. Langan talks about having a strong moral compass, acting with integrity, resisting the temptation to chase wealth and power for their own sake.
He also emphasizes community, connecting with people who share your values, working together to make things better.
He might not have all the answers, but he makes a strong case for a more mindful, purposeful life, a life with meaning.
So whether you're with Langan all the way or you have some disagreements, we hope this deep dive got you thinking, maybe even inspired you to keep exploring these big questions about the universe, about our place in it all.
Keep searching, keep asking, keep diving deep. That's what it's all about.